The Sports Time Podcast.
Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Nicely from the Ball Fake podcast. How's it going?
How you doing, man? Not too bad. And yourself?
I am doing great. Thanks for coming on late notice. Let's first start off to talk more about your podcast. I saw it yesterday and I had to check it out. So can you tell us more about your podcast, what you've been doing, how long you've been doing it, stuff like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I created the Ball Fake podcast. I came up with the idea last summer before, after the entire COVID-19 thing happened. I started it with my co-host, Greg King. He's actually a student at the University of Evansville. For you guys that don't know, that's the team that beat Kentucky a few years back on the road and everything. But, I got inspired actually by watching the No Chill podcast with Gilbert Arenas. I'm a big Gilbert Arenas type of guy. I mean, I love everything about him, his personality and everything. You know, me seeing him talk about basketball on a daily basis with his podcast, I just got inspired to start my own. So that's kind of basically the backstory for this entire setup.
Yeah, it's so cool, especially to hear so many people's, I've interviewed a lot of people over the last few months, and it's interesting to see how they started it. And it's really cool, especially, I think, since the pandemic, podcasts have gotten so much bigger, people starting their own podcasts, which is awesome, just more, stuff to listen to. So, all right, let's start off with it. Crazy. The playoffs have been super crazy, especially on Wednesday night. Now, this recording right now that we're doing is on Thursday morning. So the news that came on Wednesday, let's first start off with Chris Paul. Do you think he'll be ready for the game one of the Western Conference Finals? I
mean, we can only hope so. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, ESPN, nobody like Shams or Woj have came out with any updates about how long he'll be out for. Typically when guys get COVID, they'll be out for 10 to 14 days. But I did find out yesterday that he could possibly come back on time if he's able to get 2 negative COVID-19 tests and then something else also going along with that. So, I mean, we really don't know, but I do feel like this Phoenix Suns roster is good enough to really compete with either the Utah Jazz or the Los Angeles Clippers, even without a Chris Paul, because we saw what they did in the bubble. They went 8-0 despite them missing the postseason last year. And then Devin Booker's been playing some of the best basketball he's played in his entire career. The only guys that I'm going to be a little bit worried about is DeAndre Ayton, because we know what Chris Paul does for this guy offensively. I mean, DeAndre Ayton, he's doing a great job of, rim running and, just being in the right spots at the right time. Chris Paul, being the analyzer that he is, he does a good job of getting him the basketball and putting this Phoenix Suns roster in a good position to win games. So, I mean, losing Chris Paul is definitely going to be a very big factor in this entire series, regardless if they play Utah or LA. But, I mean, what are your thoughts on it, JJ?
I think the Suns are still really good without Chris Paul, especially with how good Devin Booker has been. DeAndre Ayton has been great as well. Jay Crowder has been very good, especially when he was able to shut down LeBron in the first round. He looked excellent again against Denver.
Let's pump the brakes with the shutdown. All right, let's pump the brakes with that. It was an ankle injury. This is a guy that is an All NBA caliber player, and he was in MVP contention in the first two of 3 polls. So let's just relax with the shutdown word. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he would. The correct term is limiting LeBron, especially in the first round. I would say he did somewhat of that, or I guess he did that against Denver as well. But I feel like a lot of people kind of forget about Jay Crowder. He was really good back in the day when he was in Boston. And then I think people I guess he was in Utah as well, but I feel like people kind of forgot how good he was. But I would definitely say that Suns still have a shot against the Jazz or the Clippers. Speaking of the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard out, but yet they're still able to take care of the Jazz in Game 5. You said earlier before the recording that you thought the Clippers were still going to win. Do you think they can take the series? And were you shocked that they won Game 5?
I was not shocked. The thing about Paul George is, he's, for somebody who's considered a star player or superstar in this league, he's very much a wild card as well. You don't know if you're going to get the 35-point Paul George, who's shooting 10 of 22 from the field, knocking down 5 3-pointers, something like that. Or you're going to get the Paul George that scores 15 points and goes 4 for 17, and it can't hit a grape in the ocean. But I did feel like, with him coming off a phenomenal regular season, I mean, he was just named to All-NBA second team, I believe. And given the fact that, he's got the right coach in the right system, and, some decent players around him. Reggie Jackson has stepped up. Luke Kennard has shown that he can play in the postseason with this group and everything. And then, you know what you're getting from the rest of these guys and Terrence Mann, their other role players. I felt like Paul George was the one factor that was going to decide whether they come out with a win or a loss. And then it definitely helped that, they really limited Donovan Mitchell last night. Everybody talked about him being an all-NBA snub. He certainly didn't look like it last night. So, I mean, with all that being said, I wasn't really too surprised. I mean, we all know Paul George, he's very capable of these type of nights. The only thing is he's just very inconsistent.
Yeah, I feel like he's been all right this postseason. I think he's just been inconsistent, I would say. We all know that, playoff P, as they like to call, a lot of times they would call him pandemic P, or, he chokes a decent amount of times, but I think in Game 5 he certainly stepped up. He did what he was supposed to do, and I feel like if he can do that in Game 6, man, I think the Clippers can win this series, and I don't think Kawhi is coming back in the second round, even if they have a Game 7. I don't even know if he's coming back in the Western Conference Finals. We haven't really gotten a whole lot of updates. I know Shams Charania from The Athletic said that most likely he's out indefinitely. Do you think he makes a comeback in the conference finals?
I mean, we certainly hope so, you know what I mean? I mean, typically dealing with a knee injury like that, the knee sprain, it takes about, if it's a grade 1 or grade 2 knee sprain, it typically takes about 2 to 4 weeks to heal. But if he has to get surgery on it, things like that, that typically makes the recovery a little bit longer. You're looking at from at least 4 to 6 months in recovery. So, I mean, it's just kind of hard to tell given the fact that we have not much information on, what exactly is going on with Kawhi Leonard. A lot of people thought he tore his ACL. That doesn't seem to be the case, but it does seem very concerning for the Los Angeles Clippers. And, this is somebody who's been playing phenomenal basketball. I mean, in the postseason, he's first in points, he's first in PER, second in rebounds per game, and he's third in field goal percentage. So, I mean, you definitely want Kawhi Leonard to be a guy that suits up for your ball club and will possibly help you win the NBA Finals ultimately.
Yeah, as a Kawhi Leonard fan, it was very disappointing to see what happened in Game 4, but I thought it was just, it was fine. He took himself out after with, 4.5 minutes left to go in Game 4, I want to say.
Yeah, it was 5 minutes left.
It seemed like he would be, it seemed like he would be fine, but at the same time, we know he's had problems with that type of injury, so hopefully he comes back and better than ever. Let's go on to the coaches' firings that happened on Wednesday as well. Scott Brooks was let go by the Wizards. I wasn't super shocked by that. What did you think about that?
Well, I think they're a step closer to getting Westbrook out of there, hopefully. I mean, because we know Scott Brooks and Westbrook's connection as, a player and a coach. I mean, Scott Brooks just came out a few months ago stating that he feels like Russell Westbrook is the second best point guard all time. I mean, obviously I don't agree with that, but, it just kind of depends on what these two do with Westbrook and Bradley Beal. I mean, I don't really know what head coach can really come in and fix them because I know this is a team that they struggle defensively and their offense is pretty lackluster. They didn't run many sets with, Scott Brooks in the organization and everything. Russell Westbrook was very inefficient. His style of play kind of hurt their spacing to a certain degree. But, I mean, I guess, guys like Chauncey Billups is somebody that you definitely want to be looking at if you're the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, and I feel like Bradley Beal is probably out the door as well. I don't know if he's a free agent this year or he gets traded. I think he's got an option on his contract or something like that. So we'll see what happens there. Let's jump on to the Pelicans firing Stan Van Gundy. I was a little shocked that they fired him after just one season. I'm not a super huge fan of Van Gundy, but what did you think about that firing?
I mean, he didn't show us anything that was spectacular. You know what I mean? I mean, Lonzo Ball improved his 3-point percentage. He does need to improve in other aspects of his game, especially if it was ball handling and, just being able to create off the dribble. And then you have Zion Williamson who's quote unquote an all-star snub alongside, a decent amount of young youthful players that, will be very beneficial for this offense. But it didn't seem like Stan Van Gundy's offense really worked for them in the entire year. I mean, a lot of times the Pelicans, they would be doing good in a game. They would be up 20 points and then all of a sudden give up a 30-10 run. And then, they end up losing the game ultimately. And then on top of that, I mean, obviously this is a players' league. Stan Van Gundy, he doesn't, strike me as the type of guy that really builds great relationships with players. I mean, just ask Dwight Howard, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think that Stan Van Gundy was a guy for New Orleans, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Van Gundy isn't. I feel like he was better earlier in his coaching career, and now lately he just seems like everywhere he goes, he gets fired. He got let go in Detroit. Now he gets let go in New Orleans. And with that such a talented roster, I felt like he could have done better. And I feel like that job's going to be very. I think there's going to be a lot of coaches that are going to want that job. I think what Freddie Coleman on ESPN on Wednesday night was saying that most likely there's going to be a huge line at the door waiting to be a head coach there because of so many, because of Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram. If Lonzo Ball stays, that job is very enticing for a lot of coaches who want to be head coaches in the NBA. Let's jump on to the Hawks and Sixers. What a comeback from Atlanta. Were you shocked that they made such a comeback?
I'm not shocked that Atlanta made a comeback. I'm more so shocked that Philadelphia gave up a 26-point lead. Like, essentially, it seems like Joel Embiid can play 3 quarters for you, and then in the fourth quarter, he's just gassed. Like, I think that has to do with him not playing heavy minutes and back-to-backs in the regular season. That's kind of starting to catch up with him. And I don't know what's gotten into Tobias Harris. I mean, this is a guy getting max money. He's getting paid like a superstar. And I think he had 4 points in the second half. And then Ben Simmons, I think that Hacker-Simmons thing is really starting to mess with him mentally. I mean, this is somebody that, he's just as good as Giannis in transition. And with all that being said, he doesn't really seem like he's been as aggressive because he kind of seems like he wants to avoid the free throw line and everything. So I feel like all that coming into play is kind of, having a negative effect on their offense, and then it just tends to translate to their defense.
Speaking of Ben Simmons, do you think he'll be traded?
Absolutely. I don't think so. I just can't see it. I can't see it. I mean, I know Elton Brand, I don't know what's up with him. He's a great GM, but he seems to have like a ton of fetishes with like big man. You know what I mean? Like paying Al Horford and guys like that, big time money. But I can't see them giving up on it right now. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't see it, especially for Damian Lillard. Like, I don't know. I feel like Portland, they would want a little bit more than just Ben Simmons, like similar to like the James Harden trade packages when you're throwing in Ben Simmons and maybe a first round pick, things of that nature.
So let's jump on to the Bucks and Nets. Nets are up 3-2. I'm assuming by the time this comes out, the series will probably be over. But do you think there's any hope for the Bucks?
I mean, given the fact that they'll be heading home for Game 6, I think they can pull off a win. Simply because I don't think Brooklyn is good enough to win a game on the road, especially when they're shorthanded a little bit. No Kyrie Irving, and then you're dealing with a banged-up James Harden. I mean, he shot 1 for 10 from the field last game, 0 for 8 from 3. So he's going to be minimized. And I think that the Mike Budenholzer, he's listening to all the critics and everybody talking about his lack of adjustments. I think he's going to make the proper adjustments. But really, Milwaukee just needs to stick to their game plan. It seems like in the first 24 minutes of the game in the first half, they do a great job of that. And then in the second half, they get very complacent. And it starts with Giannis shooting 3-pointers in transition, which I have no problem with. But you kind of have to get back to your bread and butter, especially when your team goes a little over 3 minutes without scoring a basketball, because, that tends to lead to, Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday trying to force something and create something offensively. And then it tends to be bad basketball. And then that ends up hurting you defensively, especially going up against a great offensive team in the Brooklyn Nets. So
do you think if the Nets end up winning this series, do you think the Bucks will blow everything? Or do you think they'll just blow their team?
I mean, I don't think so. I think the Milwaukee Bucks, they have enough talent to compete in either conference. It's just I've been saying this for about 2 years now. Mike Budenholzer, he's not a championship coach. He fails to make in-game adjustments, and whenever he does, it's very too late. It's about 2-3 games late in the series when he tries to make those type of adjustments. I mean, I don't understand why they force Giannis to play on the perimeter so much, given the fact that, he's one of the best inside presence in the NBA. I mean, if you just mix it up a little bit with having him play on the baseline, short corner, mid-post, and then, have him play in transition, semi-transition, bringing the ball up the floor, I think this Milwaukee Bucks team has a great shot of, beating anybody on a nightly basis. But Mike Budenholzer, he doesn't seem to be the coach that, is going to be able to get the best out of all of his players individually and as a team overall.
And I think the Nets are going to end up probably winning the whole thing because they're so talented. But if the Hawks end up winning the series and the Nets end up winning their series, do you think the Nets could sweep the Hawks, or do you think the Hawks could actually give the Nets a run for their money?
I think the Hawks can give the Nets a run for their money. I mean, essentially these two offenses, I don't want to say they're the same, but both of them can produce, especially, Brooklyn Nets with Kevin Durant. I mean, this is a guy that's susceptible to go off for a 40-point night on any given night. It really, when it comes to Brooklyn, it's really more so about the role players. Like, will Blake Griffin step up and, dive on the floor for loose balls like he did in the first round against the Boston Celtics? Can Jeff Green be productive on both sides of the basketball? I don't think that he, has another game where he makes 7 3-pointers out of 8 attempts. But if Brooklyn can, get some help from their role players and everything, like guys like Bruce Brown and Joe Harris, I think they have a legitimate shot of, beating this team. But I think the series goes no less than 6 games, in all honesty.
Yeah, I just think Brooklyn is so good right now. Even without Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant and James Harden are so good. And, of course, Durant dropped 49 points in Game 5. I'm not sure exactly how long Kyrie Irving is out, but do you think if he's out for a substantial amount of time, do you think the Nets can still win games?
It's tough because obviously, speaking on if they surpass, the Milwaukee Bucks and end up playing in the Eastern Conference Finals, if they're playing against a team like the Atlanta Hawks who, can put up great offensive numbers similar to them, I think it's going to be a lot tougher because one thing that the Brooklyn Nets have struggled with all year is their defense. And obviously, they've done a lot better and been able to, really contribute on that side of the basketball in the second half of the season, especially in the postseason. But I don't know, man. I mean, if they're playing a team like the Philadelphia 76ers, they have a good shot, even without Kyrie Irving. But when it comes to Atlanta, I just feel like Atlanta just has that it factor. And, Trae Young being who he is, I don't think that Brooklyn has anybody on that side of the court that can, really minimize him like, the Philadelphia 76ers do with Ben Simmons. So, I mean, it's really more so a toss-up. And you're probably just going to hope that, this team makes less than 5 or 6 3-pointers and, you have a great night offensively.
Yeah, and I think – the Nets are just so good, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. This has definitely been a wild playoffs, and it's definitely been super exciting. So at the end of the day, who do you think plays in the finals, and what team do you have winning it all?
See, the team I had winning it all was the Lakers, and obviously, they were coming off of a championship in the bubble, but, they were derailed with injuries all year, and then you have to look at it. That roster just wasn't very good. I mean, there was a bunch of complementary players that didn't complement each other. Dennis Schroeder can't be your third option on a championship team. They lack scoring, and, their shooters just didn't pan out in the postseason. And then defensively, they weren't all that great either. But it's so hard to tell because you don't know who's going to suit up on a night-in, night-out basis. I mean, we still got to wait on the news with CP3 and the Suns. We got to wait on the news for Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. And then, I don't know what Mike Conley's dealing with within his injury. I haven't really looked too much into that. But if I was just going off pure guts, I would say probably the Phoenix Suns facing the Brooklyn Nets, man, probably, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think that's the most safest pick. And I think if the Clippers had Kawhi Leonard, I would be all in on the Clippers. But I'm still worried that somehow the Jazz are going to take this series in 7 games. But I definitely think it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens, but I think Brooklyn is the most talented team, and it would definitely be exciting, though, to see Chris Paul finally play in the NBA Finals. So we're very close to ending the interview, and thanks for coming on nicely.
Most definitely.
I did have one question about Utah. If Utah loses this series, are they going to look back and say, man, we had a chance to win without Kawhi Leonard, LeBron's no longer in the playoffs? Are they going to look back and are they really going to regret what happened this postseason?
I mean, obviously you want to come out with a win as a competitor, but I don't necessarily think that they would look back and have much regret. I mean, they were the best team in the NBA record-wise. You made a deep postseason run if you make it to the Western Conference Finals, but I don't think this is a situation where they should necessarily walk with their heads down. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just don't feel like Donovan Mitchell can do it on his own. Like guys like Bogdanovich have to definitely step up. Rudy Gobert, he has to be the defensive player of the year that everybody voted him to be. And, you have to get production from Royce O'Neal on both sides of the basketball. And then obviously Joe Ingles and Jordan Clarkson, they have to do what they do offensively.
Yeah, definitely 100% agreed. Before we end the interview, you talked about your podcast earlier, but do you have anything in store for the future?
Yeah, we obviously just joined the Off the Ball Network. I'm looking forward to, working with a ton of these other guys who have podcasts and, radio shows as well. But for our personal podcast, we're starting to get more and more interviews with college basketball players, high major D1 basketball players. We just finished the interview with Clemson guard Alex Hemingway. Make sure you guys check that out on our YouTube channel. We're also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we're getting ready to, interview Christian Lander of Indiana University. And we're also trying to get in DeAndre Williams of Memphis. And we're very close to getting Quentin Grimes, an NBA draft prospect, on our podcast as well. So we got some big things coming for you guys in the next couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks again for coming on nicely. Can we find your podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that good stuff?
Yeah. We're definitely available on all three of those platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Once again, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And our primary source is YouTube. So make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe on all of our YouTube videos as well.
All right. Thanks for coming on nicely. It was great. I love talking about the NBA, especially during the most hectic time right now. That's the NBA playoffs. So, again, thanks for coming on, and don't forget to check out the Ball Fake podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town podcast, or the STP pod for short. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town podcast, click on the left. If you want to subscribe to the channel, click on the right.